the league has changed a lot too in the last 6 years. I think at a pace that even the team didn't really expect. I mean, they're caught a little flat-footed. It really started to manifest the year they got beat for the division in 2018 by Milwaukee. Just the way teams have developed pitching and how building around on base and hitting home runs sort of caught up to them. They had just a slate of guys who couldn't hit a high fastball when the entire league started moving to throwing 98 high in the zone. So I think things accelerated more than it would have if they had had the same sort of core 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So they kind of got caught on that. But yeah, I mean, obviously things have changed. They've gone the wrong direction for wins and losses. But I mean, I'm relatively I'm more on the optimistic side as far as Twitter goes and as far as the fan base goes right now. I think we're seeing some really good stuff. I mean, last night Keegan Thompson was fantastic. Him and Steele have been kind of the bright spot that they're developing some pitching internally, and I think that they're going in the right direction. I mean, it's less fun to not to have a team that's going to win 75 rather than 105 games as they did in 16. But I think that there's little bright spots. There's signs of progress. But it's it's you have to get to know an entirely new team now. You have to get really into guys like Christopher Morel coming up, and if Nelson Velasquez can turn into something, or further down the ranks, following prospects again, which I think we all thought we were past really staking our hopes on guys in high A ball, but there's a lot there. I mean, it's just how you want to look at it.
Yeah, I'm in the same optimistic boat right now. In fact, I was kind of inspired by Sahadev Sharma's athletic article earlier this past week, talking about some of the surprises, the good things with the team
Hmm.
so far from this year. And you mentioned it, Christopher Morel right off the bat. Uh, he was hitting well, as a leadoff guy, which we haven't seen since Dexter Fowler,
Right.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's been in the 9 spot recently. So, I mean, it's been a breath of fresh air to have a player like that, that's fun. The team isn't always fun, but over the last few weeks, they're roughly a 500 ball club. They won some
Yeah.
series. They're probably not going to win the Dodgers series, but outside of the Pittsburgh series, they beat Atlanta, Boston, and so on. So, yeah, Christopher Morel has been a nice surprise over the last month or more. I don't know what people were kind of thinking about with Morel when he first came up, but he's just been a great surprise.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, he's been great. I mean, he's got to be a top 3 contender for Rookie of the Year right now. I know there's some discussion about that yesterday. Yeah. Coming into the year, he was sort of just he was an interesting prospect, but he wasn't one of the guys everybody was talking about, right? Like, came in hearing about Ed Howard and Christian Hernandez and Triantos and PCA, but like Morel was kind of there kicking around. I think he finished the year last year in AAA.
I think
Like
so,
just like the
yeah.
last month of the year he was in AAA, but he was always exciting. Like this could be something here, but nobody was really putting him in that top echelon. And I mean, he hasn't missed a beat since he's come to the bigs. Like he's OPS in over 800. He's playing multiple positions well. Center field, I think, is a work in progress, but he's got the athleticism. He's got the instincts for it. It's sort of just getting more time there. I don't think he played it very much in the minors. He was more of an infielder, so that's going to come. Like, you can't watch him play center and say like he cannot make it there. Like he's just got to get more reps, and that's a good thing to see. So to have one guy come out of the system and not one of the ones everybody thought was going to be up here this year and be a big contributor is just such a positive sign. And you don't want to read too much into one player, but if that's what their minor league development is turning into rather than what it was in the prior 5 years, like there's a lot to be excited about, especially with the degree of talent that's in the lower levels right now and starting to make their way up and producing. And I think that's for a team that is in a rebuilding phase or a pivot or whatever way they want to brand not winning 80 games this year.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of words for it, but for a team in that sort of phase, like you want to see these guys start coming up and producing, and that's been the thing that has made me optimistic about it. And also bringing up kind of their record the last few weeks, they won, I think it was 5 series in a row or 4 out of 5, and beat some good teams. But even before that, there were some bad games in that losing streak. But they're not getting their doors blown off. Like even against
Right.
LA the last couple nights, like that's the best team in the National League, and they had to.
Could have won
Yeah,
both,
exactly. They
essentially.
had
Should
needed
have
a
won
19
Friday night
rows.
anyway.
Yeah, yeah, it's the one game David
Yeah.
Robertson finally blows. But they're losing 1 run games. They're losing close games. They're competitive. Like that makes you think, okay, if they go out and get the 1 5 win player, that's going to maybe repel them, or they replace the Jonathan Villar and Anderson Simmons at bats with a top prospect, like that could push them over. So there's at least this is not the Red situation who are going to be probably in a 5-year rebuild. This is an Oakland who's going to win 60 games this year. Like this is a different scenario, which I mean, it's fun. Like the guys like Morel and the guys like Thompson are making you kind of see what the future could be, and that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, I was looking at Morel real fast. He actually only played in 9 games
Okay,
in AAA at the end of the season last year, and he was in AA the rest of the time. So, and obviously some AA games this year, but not many AAA games. He's been playing really well, obviously, as we were talking about, 9 homers as well. So we've seen some pop, and he's just been, he had the on base streak forever. So he's been really fun to watch. Going back to when the season was starting, post lockout and everything, and actually
right,
getting
right,
into April and everything, we knew the team probably wasn't going to be a playoff contender. You would have had to have everything go right just to even
yeah.
sniff the wild card conversation. And I didn't want to put it as like on a scale of 1 to 10, how surprised or not surprised. But within that sentiment, is this team more or less what you would have expected to this point in the season?
I think record wise, I thought they'd be a bit better, but I think if you flip, 5 of those one run games, they'd be about what I would expect. I said coming into the year, they're like a 78 win team,
Yeah.
probably true talent.
Yeah, same.
But then, like last year, that's where the Giants were supposed to be, and then they had a bunch of their veterans go off and that carried in the playoffs. I think, I mean, the team has been forthright that like they've said that they looked at what the Giants have been doing the last couple of years, and that was a model they wanted to follow. So kind of had like the spark of optimism, like, well, maybe they've got something following that model that they're going to outplay everybody and win 85 games and make the playoffs. But that wasn't like the probabilistic idea, but that was just like, well, maybe they've got something secret. So I mean, record wise, they're a little bit under where I'd expect, but they also miss like Miley's pitched
Yeah.
what 2 starts, 3 starts, like Roman's missed time, like Smiley with a month now, month and a half. So they've really been banged up in the rotation and had to. He's actually been okay lately, but like Mark Leiter Jr. has been getting starts that you thought were going to be Marcus Stroman. Like
That's
that's a
true.
big difference. Caleb Killian was not ready to come up, but they just ran out of pitchers on their 40 man. There's been an overreaction to that. I think that he's still going to be fine, but like that was a guy who should have been in AAA all year working on things, but it wasn't. I don't think their intention was for him to come up and be a really great pitcher, but I mean, they didn't have any other choices at that point unless they had to start DFAing guys. So I think, I mean, they're behind, but they're behind record wise where I thought, but they're ahead of where I thought they would be in terms of player development. Like I did not think that we would be getting, a probable middle of the rotation out of Justin Steele and Keegan Thompson at this point in the year. Like
Exactly.
they could be the 3-4 starters for 5 years. I mean, Thompson, there's been a lot of talk about Thompson developing the slider. He threw it, I think, 12 times for strikes last night, 13 times for strikes last night. Like that's a real pitch that changes the expectations for him in a way that I don't want to comp him to 2015 Jake Arrieta, but 2014 Arrieta, you saw he started developing that cutter, and all of a sudden he went from a decent kind of project pitcher to we really could have something here, and it's just sort of that same vibe. So I think, yeah, I mean, I thought they would be closer to 3 or 4 under 500 rather than 12 games under 500, but I also think they're way ahead in terms of player development than I expected, and if they start getting some of these starters back from the IL, like they could go 500 the rest of the way, no problem, and that would be a good thing to see. I also will add to that too. I was looking at their fan graphs, like all their WRC pluses and WAR yesterday, and like the 9 guys they're starting now are all over. They're all above replacement. They're all over 100 WRC plus. They're above league average offensively. Where they got dragged down was guys who aren't here or on the IL right now, like Hayward and Simmons, Simmons is still here, but they're not. They're effectively not playing him. And Villar and like Schwindel's first month. So like the line they're putting out there now is at least respectable and can perform. And you had some health pitching wise, like they might go over 500 the rest of the way, and I think that'd be a lot to look forward to next season, especially if they can open up the checkbook a little bit and add to it.
Yeah, going back to Thompson, I'm totally cool with based on what you said, we'll expect hitters in the future in the World Series and Cy Young. So we'll say he's going to be Arrieta, even though he's probably not going to be that. But it'd be nice, obviously, even though that's probably not fair on him.
Yeah, sure. I'm going on record right now.
Yeah,
He's going to put up the Jake Arrieta second
there you
half of
go.
2015 immediately. The most dominant stretch of the last decade. That's
Oh
Keegan
yeah.
Thompson.
Going back also to what you were saying about the Cubs, hopefully won't be like the Reds or Oakland in terms of a forever rebuild. Essentially, the Orioles, that team was historically bad, I think, last year, and now they're almost a 500 team. The AL East is pretty much over for intensity purposes, but the entire division
Right.
is almost above 500. The Orioles are playing really well. They're not the horrible
Yeah.
team that they were. They're a lot better this year. So hopefully the Cubs are maybe not like Baltimore, but at least in terms of, 500 competitive a lot quicker. The Orioles seem to be making those strides fast all of a sudden. So
Absolutely. And something I think people kind of miss is development happens a lot quicker now than before with the way teams' minor league systems are run. Like Baltimore, we knew going into the year they had a top. I think they're the third ranked system in baseball. But they're coming off a bunch of bad years. And you didn't see a lot on that roster, but then they start graduating guys in the majors, and it doesn't take a player 4 years from when they're drafted to make the bigs anymore. Guys are getting up quicker. They're adapting a lot faster. Even Morel had a rookie wall. It lasted a week, and then he came back and was hitting again. Like I just think teams are a lot more on top of how they handle young players and how they can get them through the system. And you look at the Cubs are going to have a top probably 10 system after the draft this year. Like they could be pushing guys up next year that in the past would have taken 5 years to get to the bigs. And being 20 years old doesn't preclude you from making it to the majors anymore. And they've got guys who are going to be around that age next year. So I think that things can happen very fast in terms of a roster turning around. You need the talent in the system; it can't come from nowhere. But people looked at, just in town, the White Sox rebuild took a full 4 years to get from trading everybody to getting everybody through the system to the bigs. I just don't think it's going to be that timeline. I think that's sort of an antiquated thing now. And yeah, the Orioles are a great example when you start getting people from your system through quickly into the bigs. Like you can start winning games really, really fast. I think they're 4 out of the wild card right now, and I mean, you put them in the AL Central, they might be contending for that division. They've got a better record than I think everybody but Cleveland and Minnesota there. So yeah, I mean, it's not hopeless. Like 23 could be a contention year right away,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we want to get into the whole opening the checkbook because that's not a sure thing right now with this team, but I think that it's as close as adding that one superstar position player, and there are a couple out there this year that maybe that flips. This isn't exactly how wins above replacement works, but maybe that flips a few one-run games. Like maybe that guy comes up in the eighth and hits the go-ahead double rather than Jan comes flying out to left field or something, and all of a sudden you flip a few more of those games, and it's a lot different right now. So I don't think it's as hopeless or um, like a 10-year timeline to rebuild this thing.
Kyle Hendricks has obviously struggled. He's out right now. Do you still feel high about Hendricks in the
Right.
rotation in the future, or where are you on him?
That's really the toughest one for me. So it's a good that's a good brain teaser. Putting on the spot. I think for him, he's always been like a low margin of error guy, right? He can't just get away with throwing a fastball past someone, or some wicked slider or something. That should age well. I think for him, it's not aging as well as everybody would have expected. Because actually his velo has sort of stayed up there. It's just he's had issues locating. He's had issues, especially early in games, settling in right away. And like it's the meme now of Kyle Hendricks first inning always gives up a home run or whatever. I wish I was more optimistic about his long term. I really thought that when they signed him to that 4-year extension, it would just be 4 years of steady performance. A guy like him not relying on stuff would be a good thing, but I guess location and command and movement on his sinkers also has
Yeah,
an aging curve too. This is a really kind of nondescript answer, but I don't know. Like I think he's a smart enough guy. He can figure out ways to improve or kind of account for his own drop off in performance. But I mean, I think that I would expect him as a back into the rotation guy rather than the number 2 starter he was in the past, like borderline ace. Which is fine. I mean, he signed for one more year. If he can eat innings at around a 4.50 ERA moving forward, like that's a perfectly fine fifth starter or fourth starter. I think he could be a good mentor for some of the young guys that bringing up. Like he doesn't if Stroman can get back to what he can normally do, and if the Thompson and Steele trajectory stay fine, like you're not counting on Kyle Hendricks to be your ace, to be your stopper. And I think that if the sinker and changeup combination can work okay, like he can be a perfectly adequate back of the rotation starter. And but I mean that does kind of put them in the spot to go try to sign a top rotation guy this offseason or get Killian to a place where he could be a top 2 or 3 guy, like, or just add depth behind it, in case like Hendricks' shoulder becomes a problem, or so you might have to kind of count on him to not be able to put up the innings that he used to put up, and have to kind of have like a backup plan there.
Yeah, and Willson Contreras is another guy. He's leading starting catcher in the All-Star game, best catcher in baseball, really. I would guess he's gone at the trade deadline, you would assume.
You would think so. I kind of have a contrarian opinion here than what you'll see out there, because everybody's like, oh, he's definitely gone. He's definitely gone. Catchers, it's funny. Catchers don't tend to really move at the deadline, beyond like backups. I think the last kind of blockbuster was Jonathan Lucroy in 2016. I know Austin Nola got moved last year or 2 years ago, but like he was always seen as he was sort of in a part time, like a platoon type role with San Diego. So it wasn't like this; they were going out and getting a starting catcher. Um, there's been, and they brought this up with Contreras specifically. There's a sense that you don't want to acquire a catcher 2 months before the playoffs because you have to build a rapport with the pitching staff. And I think that if you're a top in the league like game caller and framer, it sort of makes that easier. Willson is neither of those things. He's got a great arm. He's made great strides with his framing, but I mean, pitchers on this year's Cubs team have said how like gone out of their way to praise Young
Right.
Gomes for his game calling. So clearly that is. I mean, they're not trying to insult Willson, but when you're coming out and saying this, oh, it's amazing working with this other guy, how good he is at game calling, you're kind of making a statement about the other catcher you've worked with, implicitly. So when you kind of put that in, like, is there a team that's going to really go out of their way to acquire as good as Wilson's bat is? And I'm sure he could DH or play first for somebody, but I mean, the Cubs are going to want to trade him at his value as a catcher. I mean, I am very much in the extend him trade. I've sort of come around on that. I was kind of like, well, we don't know how he's going to age. Like, he's 30, he's a catcher, he's caught a lot of games, but now I think they've sort of figured out a way to rest him appropriately, and get the most out of his bat, which, coming back to the Giants, who are apparently the model organization, they figured that out with Posey about halfway through his career, how they could get him to catch 80 games and play first for 80 games to manage his innings and get the most out of his bat. I think the Cubs are doing that with the DH slot with Willson, where you could catch 60, 80 games and then DH for 80 and get 20 off. Like, that's unlocking his full potential offensively. Like, we're seeing it this year.
Where do you think Correa ends up long term after this year? And also, just throwing this out there too, where do you think Judge ends up? Do you think he stays or do you think he goes elsewhere?
I would be shocked if New York wasn't the biggest player for him. But it also seems like the bridge is kind of burned because they haven't signed an extension yet. And it was kind of a weird thing, but there was some like Rizzo was in his ear apparently in the offseason about like, don't reward a team for not signing you. I guess there's some hard feelings with the Cubs with him. Um, Judge is from Northern California. The Giants are in the middle of a contention cycle, and they're going to have money to spend, and they could absolutely use him in their outfield. I think that would make a ton of sense. Plus, with his power, it's not going to matter that he plays in a big stadium, like Oracle. So I think, gun to my head, I'm taking the Giants, but I just can't believe the Yankees wouldn't try to make a big push for him. Correa, it's I mean, it's almost certain he's going to opt out, right? Like, the extra 2 years were just insurance in case he got hurt or underperformed. I mean, I think the smoke with the Cubs was real, but I think that was a product of they didn't like the other shortstops as much. They weren't as big on Seager. They weren't as big on Trevor Story. I mean, they absolutely could have signed Trevor Story for what Boston, did if they wanted to, and they passed on that. I guess if Boston lost Bogarts, they might be involved. There was talk there last year. The Orioles were in on Correa last year. Obviously, they're outperforming what everybody expected. He's got familiarity with their front office. But like, that would make a lot of sense for them, right? Like,
I'll leave you on this. So we talked about the Cubs, maybe float around 500 ish towards the end of the season and everything, get a good enough vibes going into next season. I don't think this is going to happen, although it kind of feels sort of
yeah.
possible right now. Is there any way the Cubs finish with a better record than the White Sox? Not even waiting for them to get hot, because at this point, this is kind of who they are, unless they get on like a Braves run. But I don't really see
Yeah,
that
I mean,
happening.
it's July. You kind of are what you are at this point. You can improve things at the deadline, but like, you're not going to change the entire landscape of your team at that point. I mean, the Braves did it. Like, the Braves acquired an outfield because they didn't have one, and that was enough to push them ahead, along with like their good players started playing well. Like that's not. I don't think the issue with the White Sox is their good players aren't playing well. Like Robert and Anderson are putting up enough numbers. There's just a lot of discrepancies on that team. Like they have Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets and Jake Berger are all the same guy, and they're not particularly great major league players. Like they're playing, they've got a manager. Like leaving the whole manager thing out of it, which is I mean, probably the crux of their issues. But it's just like that team had some legitimate questions coming in, and they've manifested in the worst possible way. They're not gonna just pave over that at the deadline, or and like Giolito has been terrible, and he was an alleged sticky stuff guy last year. We saw his baseball savant numbers drop off when they banned spider tack and all that. Like they're it's going like a worst case scenario for them, but that possibility was always there. It's not like this is oh my god,
Yeah.
what happened? Like how did this all fall apart? It's like, well, yeah, we kind of saw how this could happen. Then you tack on, as I've described on Twitter, an octogenarian drunk at manager who is making outright bad decisions that we see. We don't even know what's going on in the clubhouse, but it doesn't seem like there's um, that presence with him that's going to rally the troops. So can the Cubs switch to the better record? I'd bet against it, but it's not impossible. I mean, I think what's overlooked a little bit with the Cubs at the deadline is even if they trade, let's say they trade all the names that have come up, like they're not going to be replacing them with like the Romine brothers or Vargas. Like they're going to be calling up real prospects to fill those ranks in. So, like they're not going to get markedly worse, even if they go full fire sale. And I'm on the side where I don't think they're going to. I think it's going to be the relievers, maybe Drew Smiley and maybe Ian Happ, maybe Ortega, but not. It's not going to be trading three superstars like they did last year. So I bet against it. I think the White Sox are going to try to add at the deadline because that division is still up for grabs a little bit. I mean, Minnesota's pulling away, but it's not 15 games or something. And sort of with the Sox at this point, like they're so all in, why not chase it? Like there is a backup plan. This is sort of this year and next are their contention years, so you sort of have to, burn the ships and go for it. But like, man, if Tim Anderson missed any significant time, I think the Cubs could pass him. Like it's that. I think the margin is that thin, which is wild considering where the teams were back in April.